What is it about the number 6? In recent history, the 6 has often been a significant release. The Oneplus 6, Nexus 6 and 6P all made great strides and were some of my favourite devices. And so far the Pixel 6 looks to keep this tradition alive. Now, I'll admit that initially things were a bit rough around the edges, but the big December update really helped smooth things out. Somewhat. So stick with me as I get into my highs and lows. Starting off with the screen, it has harsher corners matching the sharp angles of the device itself. A bit of a different look to some other devices. The hole punch being centered is my preference if it has to exist. And it hasn't actually gotten in the way as much as expected. The screen is large and in line with most other devices these days. And hopefully you're used to that by now, as there are no smaller choices here. The curved edges are fine. My preference is a flat display, like the vanilla Pixel 6. But I do like the feel of the edge gestures over the curve. And I haven't had any issues with accidental touches. But most of my use has been with a case. Some detractors of the curve though is it can really pick up reflections in some brighter environments, rendering that extra screen real estate moot. And you might also run into issues physically interacting with edge content too. Maybe the accidental touch algorithm is a bit aggressive, as I often have to jab at buttons located on the edges multiple times. Something that doesn't seem to happen on the flat display on the vanilla Pixel 6. Also, keeping screen protectors adhered is a lesson in futility, as I've gone through 3 different ones already, all owing to them not liking curves as much as I do. Something rather subtle about this screen is the overall feel while tapping away. This one is harder to get across without trying it in person, but the screen really has a hollow feel compared to some other devices. And this is a product of the screen not being bonded to the mid-frame, which should aid in repairability if it comes to that. A check of screen replacement costs online so far doesn't seem to reflect the added ease though. The screen itself is bright, crisp and great to look at. Since the December update, I've had no issues with the ambient light sensor keeping things just right. The pixel dense, high refresh rate display is pretty much what is expected in a flagship these days. One nice feature is of course the variable refresh rate, which, if it works as it's supposed to, shouldn't even be noticeable, other than helping with battery life. Speaking of the battery, this one appears to be very dependent on what part of the world you're in, as signal issues and 5G usage seem to sway things significantly. But my use down under has been amazing, with most days having at least 40% when dropping it back on the charger. The longevity was my saviour on Christmas too, spent with the in-laws. This kept me out of trouble and still had 25% of the tank by day's end, and boy, was I on this thing a lot. Random Reddit scrolling, plenty of Chrome time, a good amount of YouTube, and a dash of Diablo Immortal. It should be noted though that my current sim doesn't actually get 5G, and the infrastructure is limited in most areas I inhabit anyway. But I still left the network settings on auto, and I do spend a lot of time on Wi-Fi, so that could definitely be aiding my longevity. It's a good thing that the battery is as long lasting, because top-ups are finicky and slow. The downside of the device not being bundled with a charger is you're often at the mercy of whatever you have laying around the house. And when a device is as picky about what it connects to as the Pixel 6 series, the charging experience is always suboptimal. Still, even at peak performance, it's still way slower than basically every device out of China in the past few years. There is at least reasonably fast wireless charging available, as long as you have Google's Gen 2 wireless charger and the latest update and have it set up correctly. Interface-wise, Google's Android skin is fluid and sleek, but might be a bit more animated for anyone coming from something like Oxygen OS, which went with short duration, minimal animations to give a feeling of speed. This causes the Pixel to initially feel a bit slow navigating around, and takes some getting used to. But the subtleties and polish of the transitions are logical and seamless. giving an overall more complete feeling. The performance of the UI is great too, and doesn't need animated tricks to fool you into believing it's faster than it actually is. Small things like changing apps or copying one-time passwords from notifications are done with immediate efficiency and accuracy, which was not the case on my outgoing Oneplus. The performance of the Tensor chip seemed to be doing pretty well, paired with the generous 12 gigs of RAM. I appreciate the RAM getting some good use, with Google's nudge to not have us habitually clear all open apps by putting the clear all option out of the way, and the software not killing background tasks, leaving my ad blocker running happily for weeks. Google chose an excellent time to start their hardware journey, as pure processing capabilities have been satisfactory for a while now, so day to day performance feels like any other high-end device, which has allowed for the other magic they're able to infuse, pushing AI wizardry. The most impressive of which revolves around voice, both dictation and live transcripts, working so much better than previous attempts, and with outstanding accuracy. It may not be something used all the time, but it is something that no other device can currently compete on.
The system, it'll break 100 watts pretty readily, but the thing that I'm most curious about is how this compares to...
While still on the topic of Pixel software, there are a few little things that just seem odd and hopefully yet to be improved upon. Like the reduction of customization options available in Android 12, the ever-present bar down the bottom which can't be removed, and the notification shade being less of a shade and more of an entire screen. See the OnePlus implementation for an actual shade. There are also frequent unlocking inconsistencies, with the device asking for a passcode, even though you use a fingerprint. This does seem related to smart lock and doesn't affect everyone, but it does make you second guess bothering with a fingerprint, especially as even when it does work, it still isn't the best. Speed and reliability feel similar to other optical readers like the OnePlus 7T Pro, being a bit slower and less accurate, especially with very dry or damp hands. But it has at least been consistent through my 3 different screen protectors. The hardware up in this funky visor has been pretty noteworthy, but maybe not as good as some other visors around. Video capture has been clear, even with suboptimal lighting, and so far doesn't seem to suffer distortions. The large sensor even provides the visually appealing bokeh in the right environments. You only need to compare some of my recent videos to older ones to really see the jump in quality. Photos, well, most cameras can already occasionally capture superb photos in the right conditions. But so far my experience with the Pixel 6 is that it's able to capture a great shot with quick efficiency, more often than not in a wider range of conditions with minimal effort, not every time though. The inclusion of the 4x zoom lens is also invaluable for capturing those doggo shots before they stop doing the cute thing. The autofocus is intelligent and often knows what you're trying to capture, but it does have a bias towards humans, sadly, often picking up and focusing on a person in the background when trying to capture that perfect fur baby moment, leaving it a blurry mess. So be aware that some manual focus might be required, depending on what's more important in your life. There are also a few fun camera features included here that are interesting to experiment with, and hopefully will be refined over time. Portrait mode felt redundant, as normal shots with the big sensor often looked better and were less processed. Magic Eraser is fun to play with and good for basic touch-ups, and some of the motion shots are cool, even if they didn't work super well for Cora. Moving around to the rest of the build, the speakers are reasonable and loud, offering stereo in landscape mode. The balance is a bit off, with the top or bottom frequently being too loud, messing with the subject's sound direction. This is somewhat improved in the recent update, but still an issue. The haptics are solid without being overly loud. Great that they're not an afterthought from Google, and hopefully further improved in the future. The back glass is the usual slipperiness, which seems to be a feature of high-end phones these days. The Pro variant has the more boring colour options, and the visor won't be everyone's idea of a good time. I don't mind it though, as it both gives my finger a natural spot to rest, and also makes for easier identification of my fellow Pixel 6 mates. Most will ensure protection is adequately applied before leaving the house anyway. My old reliable Spigen has been great on that front, adding nice textures to all grip points and the not power button for easy identification. So with the promise of updates well into the future, a good track record of incremental software improvements over time, and solid hardware for the here and now, the Pixel 6 Pro is a compelling device, especially with some companies recently slipping with their software promises. But with most features also applying to the vanilla Pixel 6, it makes things a bit murkier for the Pro model. Your region will be the biggest factor, availability notwithstanding. It still does have me asking if a 4x zoom lens and incrementally better components are worth an extra $300 though. That'll be rather individual and depend on what you use your phone for in everyday life. I personally love the Pro model, but unless those aforementioned additions are worthwhile to you, I find my recommendation leans more towards the vanilla Pixel 6 as the better pickup, as the perceived performance will be close to identical for most, with the benefit of a more attractive price tag and a flat screen that's easier to protect. Either way, you'll be happy with these, as they really have the beast's number.